period who worked at Bell Aerospace. One was not a Bell employee. He'll explain that. The other two are. I'm going to introduce them each in turn. This is Mr. Paul Morgante.
Don't all get up. Well, before I retired in 1992, I was an aerospace engineer for Bell Aerospace Company here in Niagara Falls, New York. I specialized in rocket engine propulsion, and I was design project engineer for the Lunar Ascent Engine. On July 20, 1969, America landed two men on the moon, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin. Michael Collins was in the command module orbiting the moon. To land on the moon, Neil Armstrong, to land on the moon, they used a craft called the Lunar Excursion Module, LEM. It was made up of two stages, the landing stage and the ascent stage. The LEM was designed and built by Grumman Aerospace Company in Long Island. As design engineer, I was a leader for this project, the engine. After landing using the lunar landing engine, the astronauts left the LEM, walked on the moon, and took samples of the lunar soil. At this time, they planted the American flag, very famous photograph. Following this effort, they boarded the LEM to return to the command module, which was orbiting the moon. They fired up the Lunar Ascent Engine and separated the ascent stage from the descent stage. Leaving the descent stage on the moon, they returned to the command module. The Lunar Ascent Engine fired for 6 minutes. It was the only part of the entire system that had no backup. If it failed, the astronauts would fall back on the moon. There was no backup because of the weight restrictions. It was a pretty heavy thing to have a backup for. The ascent engine consisted of a quad redundant valve. There was series redundancy and there was parallel redundancy in both oxidizer and fuel. And you can understand why the redundancy for reliability purposes. The nozzle and the thrust chamber were made of what we call ablative material. What it was, this is all fiberglass, no metal. And the fiberglass was in the form of an epoxy impregnated tape. And it was around and around and around and around and around.
Use the microphone.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Anyhow, the ablative was formed by wrapping this tape around a mandrel many times and then machining it to the shape they needed. Earlier in the program, I was tech support in Houston during an unmanned Apollo 5 mission. They were testing the LEM in Earth orbit. The red phone on my desk rang, and a voice said, "Hello, son?" He must have thought I was his son. He said, "We want to restart the engine." I said, "Sir, it was really not designed for that. I was afraid of injecting uncontrolled propellants over possible residual propellants, which would result in explosion." He said, "What do we have to do to restart that engine?" I thought and I said, I knew it was going around the Earth 100 miles up. I said, "Could I have one more revolution? figuring that the engine was in a total vacuum where residual propellants would boil off. He said, okay. I said, do it, start it, but don't call me. The engine was started. There was no problem. I'm showing a picture. Where do we have a picture?
Behind you.
Other side, turn the other way.
I'm showing a picture again of the ascent stage lifting off the moon. And that's the ascent engine firing.
It's on the
There's
screen.
a green.
They got it on a large screen now.
I took this photo with my iPhone. If you believe this, I have a bridge I want to study. It's called the Brooklyn Bridge. Are there any questions, please? Please don't ask too many. My memory is good, but it's very, very short. I'm done. Anybody?
Was it hypergolic, the fuel?
The fuels were unsymmetrical dimethylhydrazine
So they had,
and red fuming nitric acid, which, when they came in contact, would ignite. There was no igniter required.
What part did my husband John was piece of taking us?
He was a test engineer, and he did all the testing. He was in charge of the testing in the rocket lab. Good man. John and I were big time. Anybody else, please?
How many astronauts came off the moon using that engine?
12.
12, yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
12 astronauts. All 12 on the moon got off soon.
Everybody got out. There was never a problem.
This gentleman, did Bell have a problem with the ablative chamber?
No. The problem with the Bell had was with the injector. The injector showed signs of instability, and they made us. The injector had to be what we call bomb stable. While the injector was firing, we used to fire off a small explosive charge into the side of the combustion chamber to try to make it go unstable. And it had to pass that test. And we had trouble with that, and the final design resulted in we put a ring and a triangular shaped web on the face of the injector to make the compartment small, such that in order for it to go unstable, it had to be a very, very high frequency. And that way we beat the problem.
What drew you to wanting to get involved in this? What made you want to do this?
Well,
What was your fascination?
I started out, I graduated from Canisius College with a math degree. And I went to work for Bell as a data specialist. I continued my education at the University of Buffalo and became a mechanical engineer, wherein at work I moved up the line into the program office. Later on, I went to Canisius College again to study for my MBA. And I got an MBA. And that's why I'm so smart.
What was the most challenging part of this whole operation for you?
The most challenging was almost losing my family. I didn't see my family for many, many days. We worked 7 days a week. I was at work almost all the time. My poor wife raised the kids. That was the challenge.
They turned out well.
I'm sorry I didn't hear.
But they turned out well.
It did. That's my news. Anybody else now?
One day I got by, John brought us there to see what he did, and he went in there, there was this big explosion. And I said, is that what you do? I couldn't come over, I said, that's dangerous.
We had explosions, let me tell you. They were very common when we were fire testing the rockets. Many times there were accidents, and there would be an explosion. One time, I remember very specifically, we had a big lake behind our facility, and all the liquid drainings from the rockets firing would go into this lake. It was called Lake Sill, after Max Sill, the guy who put it in there. Well, I was out running some tests in an altitude chamber using Skydrol 500, trying to test to see if it would explode. And all of a sudden I looked up and I saw a guy on a motorcycle driving, and he arches very majestically into the lake, right into the lake. And his name was Tony Morgante. Would you believe that? I caught a lot of hell for that. But he fished himself out, and just at that time, at a very specific time, there was a rocket firing. The damn rocket blew up, and everybody had to leave the building all at once, and they see this guy climbing out of the lake. And that's what I did. Anybody else?
Thanks. Dick, if you would come up, I'll set up your slide. Here's some water.